Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. As a complement to the 21st National Compensation Forecast, John and I wanted to take some time to actually talk about the second of the top 5 HR trends for 2023. Certainly want to give it its due time. So we'd like to spend about 20 minutes or so talking about what we're seeing in the terms of flexibility when it comes into the workforce as we're looking at it in 2023. So thank you so much for joining us, John. I appreciate your time.
Good afternoon, Jeff. Good to be here. This is our 21st year doing the compensation forecast, and when we look at the 5 trends we're predicting for 23, we couldn't give it justice the time. So we broke this out into different segments. So the second one today is about, the idea that flexibility is really going to trump remote work. We all sometimes forget, not always, but sometimes we forget that we're in a retail financial services environment. People want to see us. They want us on the phone. They want to come do financial transactions in person. While all our employees are seeing all of their friends and buddies and loved ones getting to work from home, work on an RV, and go through the Grand Canyon and just call in. And it's almost like in the Brady Bunch when it was Marsha. Remember? Like, she gets to do everything. Why do I have to stay home? Or a Cinderella story. But, we're not changing the rules. Mm-hmm. So if we're going to do the best for the member, create the member experience, we're going to have to be working on all types of delivery channels. And that anchor in the office or, in the field is going to be important. So that's our talk today is some of the things we're talking about. This idea of flexibility will trump, just a pure work from home model, especially for us. So we go to our first slide here. So, the idea that it's an existential threat, that was just to get your attention. It's not existential threat.
Is this clickbait, John? Did you clickbait us?
I think I actually just did. But, when we were growing up, our parents' guidance to us was start in the mailroom, nose to the grindstone, pay your dues. Anybody can be president at one time. And first of all, it didn't work out so hot for some of our parents. And then as we saw it, we go, okay. And then our kids are saying, absolutely not. Mm-hmm. But in that traditional model that really comes from the great generation, it was really just, adherence to leadership, following and doing your part to make us collectively successful. But that's shifted. I mean, really now it used to be I was proud to work for IBM, but now I'm proud to be a programmer or a developer, So it surely shifted from organizations to people. And it really, how we kept score was, I want to make as much money for my company because I that's how I define self-esteem or that type of awareness. And then it became to, I want you to be successful so I can be successful. And then finally, the me to we, meaning do all this for your boss and make your boss successful, or, do all this so I can get a big, CEO can get a big gob of money from shareholders or from their board of directors, really came, we all need to be successful. Mm-hmm. So that me to we is kind of this idea that we all have in it, some skin in the game, so to speak. So what are the questions, the younger generation asking is, that's the existential question right there. Why am I doing this? Why am I here? Do I see myself doing this for X amount of years or minutes? Yep. It could be that. What is it for? And then, how can we do better? Meaning, is this the right place for me in the environment out there?
And I think the most prevalent question there, it kind of goes back to the whole Simon Sinek thing, why? Start with why.
Yeah.
And if they're saying, why am I doing this? Oh, because it's career progression, it's career steps and things along that line. If we haven't got that clearly delineated out and actually expressed, why am I here? Am I just here to do the thing?
And sometimes it's shame on us because we've got a great business model in the credit union industry. We're doing things for the right reasons. I mean, we're a not-for-profit financial services helping people get through life and being there for their financial needs and then doing it in really fair prices. That really resonates with our 20s.
That's a message. That's amazing.
Yeah. And sometimes you're going to have to do that in person.
Yep.
So how do we make that jive, right?
Flexibility again.
So the idea is, how do we really transform a frontline job to make it make sense so we can really get higher employee engagement, but also making sure that member expectations met?
And I think to your point, we've talked about what is the value proposition? How do we actually talk about why you are here? And that's the big key there.
Yeah. So flexibility is this theme that we're working with. And I want to make sure everybody said this is not a novel idea. I started in cranes in the 80s. I don't think it was a novel idea back then. It's like you had a kid that was going to college or community college, and they had hours Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and they wanted to work with you Tuesdays and Thursdays. Oh no, we need people. We need full-time employees. What a perfect match. Match their schedule. I can't work. I have this job, but I want to do extra stuff I want to do on the weekend. So we've always been able to match peak time periods with temporary or flexible workforces. So why is this new?
Yep.
So I want to make sure that we get that back on the table is expand your horizons and make sure you're being creative on the flexibility.
Yeah. In the past, it was just easier to say, nope, you're going to be here from this time to this time, and everybody's going to be exactly the same. I'm not going to show any preference one way or the other.
That's the egalitarianism that
Exactly.
we've been talking about is I can be fair to everyone, but I also can accommodate special needs and not have the appearance that it's being unfair to everybody else. So that's what we went. So we've done this research and we've seen it in the industry or across the country as men, leave for flexibility and women, leave because they want that supportive leadership. And sometimes supportive leadership is not the empathy of here's my family situation, here's my kid's situation, here's the other thing I need to do, and not willing to be flexible to accommodate that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's, and obviously health and well-being benefits are up there as well. But just the idea of listening to what it would take to make it work. Does it create more work for HR?
Absolutely.
On a scale of 1 to 5?
Yeah.
6. It's more
Does
work.
this go to 11? But there's the thing. It's the worthwhile investment of that time. We have to put more time into the administrative piece of this, but it goes back to that engagement and experience piece. We have to continue engaging these individuals that are slowly but surely being disengaged through the whole process.
I keep going down this road and just going back in my mind, like this idea of gig works, gig workers, like they're project specific people. We've always had that,
Yep.
Just as a quick story, when everybody went to data imaging, the project was there was 50 years of files in the back, and we had to put page one on the copier, push print, page 2, and that was beneath everyone. So we hired high schoolers and part-timers, and I guess we can call it gig workers, right? Their gig was to do data, imaging. You move to New York City and you're going to conquer the world and you live with 4 roommates, right? You ask those 5 people in that apartment how many jobs they have. They have 3, they
2
do
or
this,
3 each.
3 or 4. And those types of things. So we've always had this. So what's different? So, I don't want the press to come out and read something, oh, this is the best novel thing. Go to those basic things. And it all comes back to me, one issue is, Jeff, what can I do to put a work schedule together that when you're here, you're totally engaged, and when you're not here, you're doing whatever you want, and you want to come back.
Yep.
But if I make you come back, and you have to be here at this time,
Totally different story.
It is totally a different story.
Yeah.
And then that's what we see really resonating well.
And I think that's one of the biggest things here. It's, take into consideration the difference between change. If change happens through you, you're on board. If change happens to you, well, your defenses are up. So if I'm saying you're coming back, or, hey, this is going to be different. We know the world is different. Let's talk about what we can do to actually make a change that's beneficial for both of us.
Okay, so let's make a list of that. Like, this is what I'm going to do to you, or give your options of how I can put a flexible schedule that you're going to be engaged with. So what does it mean in retail? And we've got a list. Schedules you can count on. If a person is going to school and it's the Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule, you can't say, hey, I need you Friday next week. I thought we already went through this. I can be here Tuesdays and Thursdays, and it just can blow up on you. Predictable hours, ability to choose the work, when to start. Well, I'm not a morning person. I'd like to start,
just a little bit later.
But you know what? We can't categorize this whole generation as, they don't want to come to work. You think we still have early risers and, people that burn the midnight oil? Ask, what would they like? So start work times are important. How they do their work, I think that's very important for this next generation is they get the policy, they get the procedure, and they're going to raise their hand and say, I don't think this is the best way to do it. And if it's not the way you did it, it doesn't mean it's wrong, right? I think having that control and freedom is very, very supportive of the type of employee that's going to thrive in this environment.
Yeah, I mean, it's not marketing, it's not, all that kind of stuff, but you have to kind of approach it from that concept. If we have our defenses up immediately and we say this is what we're doing and that's it, well, you're going to meet some opposition, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. So you go through this flexibility list, and finally, once we identify, and we've talked about this in previous sessions about our high performing workforce, our critical workforce, creating those pathways to them. And we've got some material coming in later sessions, this idea of how do we work with people internally to really thrive. But in the retail environment, how do we create people to do the same thing over and over and over, because it is transaction centric, so to speak, and be excited, engaged, and find new ways to do it, better ways to do it, faster ways to do it, and really keep motivated. That's your job. So kind of the next thing that we're seeing is, okay, well, credit union industry definitely is looking at casting a wider net, for technical talent and some other areas of expertise. So this is a national survey that says, okay, here's the basic scenarios, and we dealt with this at least once a week, right, Jeff?
Absolutely.
On like, what do we do with this person that's not in the town where the credit union, headquarters is? So look at this list. The first question is, if employees request to work in a lower cost location, what's your approach?
Yeah. How do you say, okay, your salary is going to be now what?
One out of three says one scale, one location, no difference. 22% say they'll keep the salary the same, but they'll red circle it if there's a geographical difference, meaning that it's a lower cost location, so they're going to be the appearance of they're going to be more well paid for where they're moving to. 6% said they use the geographical approach, and then people say they don't do. One out of four say no work from remote. So that's that.
I'm actually surprised that there's actually 6% that say they're going to lower it. I mean that's pretty darn low, but I still think it's even higher than I expected it to be.
3 words. Mark Zuckerberg.
Mark Zuckerberg, yeah.
2 words. 2 words.
Zuckerberg, yeah. Yeah, and he was famous for saying that, we're going to pay cost of where
you're moving to
at.
Ohio?
Yeah.
Great. You're moving to Ohio, and I'm going to take 30% haircut off your pay.
That's a tough sell. I'm doing the exact same job. And the best example was, they moved to a different zip code that had a lower cost of living.
Yeah.
They were still within driving distance. It was like a 45 minutes difference versus 30 minutes.
Zip code?
Yeah, it was a zip code.
Wow.
And he's actually, that's a 20% differentiation. So we're going to lower your pay. Doing the exact same job, still commuting into the office. This wasn't even remote. It was just, their policy shifted to that. So yeah, it's a tough pill to swallow.
Do you want to hear a nerd thing?
I'm always on board with nerd things.
Before your time at D. Hilton, we had an analyst here that he actually programmed geocode locations, not zip codes. So he'd go to some satellite in the space and says, well, this is where this one's located. And then we figured out how much to pay that person by location.
That's fantastic. I've been leveraging that expertise and skill set for some time.
Tremendous waste of time, but it was very fascinating. Fascinating. So our next question here is that if you go to a higher cost of location, what do you do?
Yeah.
And then here's our list here. So no change. It's kind of the same pattern. We raise, we lower, and then again, people don't make those remote adjustments at all. We just have one system for everyone.
Yep.
But again, this is, as a credit union, you need to be prepared to have this discussion in the high scenarios and the low scenarios. And
this is kind of going back to that concept of, we've had to be reactionary in the past for all these kind of things, but we don't have that excuse anymore. It's time to actually have something in place.
Gotta have a game plan.
You got to be intentional.
And because step 2 is, you're going to have the second person ask you, and if you don't have a formula or procedure in place, it's going to appear one-off special favors, and then you might not literally quite remember what you did last time. But there will be employees that do remember and call you out on it. So it could be some challenges there.
If it's a trend, that's a big thing.
And then that third part is like, if you intentionally from day one hiring from outside of your work area, and they're going to work remote, what do you do? And we're still real constant. We're going to have one structure. We're going to have high or low pay, and then the idea that people still don't hire remote.
And I'm going back to that third point on the second point, the 10% geo difference approach, the raise pay. That's actually about where I would expect it to be because, the same kind of thing. We're doing the exact same job. It's your choice to move to the downtown New York. Sorry, we're not going to raise your pay for that.
I know. I was telling my kids, if you're in that situation, go to the absolute most expensive place. Do this Hong Kong,
Vice versa. Yeah.
London, and enjoy enjoy that work-life balance
There you go.
because they're going to pay you 40% more, right?
Yep.
That's what they're saying. Oh, that's not what I meant, though.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, but that's how it's coming across. So kind of the next step in this process is, okay, now we're going to have this workforce that new normal. It's not that traditional where everybody's going to be in the same building. They're going to be at different shifts, different times. So it's really going to come back down to this idea of how are we going to reward and recognize those folks. You know, we've talked a lot about the reward piece, but the recognition obviously is just as important for every generation.
Absolutely.
And, you know, so we start with this so all the things we talked about to this point has been rewards, and that is transactional. And you think some of the companies that get in trouble with a higher turnover right now, it's because they've treated this issue as a transaction. I'll give them more money. And you saw a slide a couple slides ago that said what? Flexibility is more important than the pay. I would give up X to have this relationship, and I would have a stronger retention strategy with that. So we just have a quick list of things that we think, okay, if you're gonna be looking at reward and recognition, the idea that, okay, that the transactional is the pay piece, but really the relation piece is the recognition. So here's a list of things that we are seeing, because the research is saying no matter what age or demographic we're talking about, people still need to be told they're doing a good job and recognized for that. So think of the things that you have to almost redouble your efforts, because what happens is out of sight, out of mind. I know the 20-somethings love the idea of mentoring and having a coach check in on them. And it's not, and it's a lot easier when they're not there to move on to the next project. But here's some list.
Yep. And this is kind of an opportunity we've been talking about this a lot, to reskill managers as well.
Yeah.
They've been doing things their same way their entire lives. They've been successful in doing that. They know to go and, pat somebody on the back and say, great job, you're doing it. Well, we can't do that as much anymore. So establishing some way to recognize, calling those out, those achievements and experience is certainly going to be something we need to do.
Well, I'll give you a story. And we think this is old fashioned. You know that one that says, send a thank you card?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, real words on real paper.
Crazy talk.
Right? What's that? I love all these new apps that'll, transform your signature into an auto font or things. Yes. Oh, look, you wrote that. Baloney. I know you didn't write that. So David Hilton wrote me a note, a handwritten note, when I was 6 months into the company, and says, "You're a tremendous resource. We're going to do great things together. And here's $600. Oop, I shouldn't have said that because it was $100 bills. Forget about that. So didn't declare that. But I still have that note to that day. It wasn't the money, because at that time that was pretty decent.
Mattered. Yeah.
That's more than pizza money back then. But the idea that he took the time out of his schedule to say those 2 or 3 sentences meant a lot. And we got to get some of that old-fashioned stuff back, because it is, real words on real paper means a lot. So when we look at that, does that reinforces the relationship piece of that frontline manager. And that's been our theme in our first session on the compensation forecast. Our number one weakness as organizations has been that frontline manager being the us versus them. They're part of them. They're ones that's supposed to be communicating the intent of some of our programs, and that's sometimes our weakest link in the intent of our programs. So, I'm not going to go through this whole list, but quirky milestones.
Those are always good.
Yeah.
The big thing is again,
excuse me.
Oh, go ahead.
The first time I told you there's no Jeff and team. That's a quirky milestone.
And I got my shirt for that.
You got a shirt for that.
We're going to plan a time to be able to put that together.
Let's do that for next one. Let's show everybody.
That'll be our thing. Okay.
But again, before we digress anymore, the idea is, I want you to take away this idea: recognition is relational, and that frontline manager is so key to making this happen successfully in organizations. And I look at your comp budgets, I look at your training budgets, I look at where you're going to spend your resources. And if I don't see enough in that category, and then I look at, how things are going to fare at the end of 23, I said, I bet you wish you would have paid a little bit more attention to that area.
It's reward and recognition. It's not just compensation.
Now, another thing we're struggling with is this idea, 5-day work weeks. I mean, in Europe, they're going to be mandated that there's going to be 3 and 4 day weekends, and you're going to be doing that work. So I think we need a game plan as Craigians, because we're in the retail environment, we're in the service environment, we have a 24/7 type of mentality that we're obligated to deliver what's going to happen. So can you imagine Tuesday through Thursday being the, core we're all here, and Mondays and Fridays? It's not going to work for us. Not in this environment. So again, how are we going to create this culture and environment where people want to be here and people want to make sure that they're not missing out because their friends are on these different schedules?
I mean, I think we would all love to have that, Monday off and Friday off. That's a great philosophy. But when it comes to the retail environment, unless we have that good rotation going through where you can use this, that'd be great. But
I'm
pretty difficult.
I'm going to put my bet on flexibility.
Yeah.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and surfs up might trump the idea that you get, 3-day weekends. I don't know.
That's possible.
But again, ask, query, make it relational, and I think the answer is going to come to you a lot stronger than just looking at a piece of research and say, oh, we have to do this.
Yeah, and I definitely think that's the right idea. There is understanding there is going to be different values associated with those benefits, and your culture might be completely different. If you have a younger populace there, they're going to value something much more than if you have an older populace or older tenured workforce.
And again, what ties these generations is I want to mentor, I want to coach, I want validation that my instincts are right. I want to be challenged and pushed. And in our current environment, in our retail environment, we can deliver 100% on those requests.
Yep.
But, I want to do that for the critical workforce. When I identify those folks, if I have to prioritize where I'm spending my time, that's where I'm spending my time, and making sure that coaching, counseling, and mentoring are going to be top notch for those folks. And then this idea of, we talked a little bit about the geographical pay. Jeff, talk a little bit about, our clients wanting us to do city pair comparisons and what's pros and cons of that.
Pros and cons of that. It's going to be highly administrative, number one, and you're going to be dealing with a lot of shifting things, kind of what we talked about before. If you do city pairs, you're going to have to go all the way down to zip code type of balancing.
Excuse me, I can do GPS location codes.
Well, not everybody has that phenomenal tool that we at here at Hilton utilize. You're going to be dealing with, and I dealt with this at a large financial institution in the past. We went down to literally the zip code. So if right across the street, you're going to have a different pay differential. It becomes this convoluted, very complex process when it really doesn't need to be that bad. What we've seen to be the most valuable is working in bands. So having a concept of saying, okay, if we are at 100% national average at our home location, plus, so we'll say 0.95 to 105 is going to be our common band. Anything that falls in cost of living.
Anchored to where?
Anchored to the main location, home location.
Right.
Anything that falls within that area, no matter where you move, if it's between 95 and 105, you're going to be on the main structure. Now, if you go 105.1 to the infinity, you've selected a certain percentage that you're going to increase the value, say, 7%. So if you're in those higher cost of living areas, go with a 7%. It doesn't matter if their cost of living is 200%. Yeah. We've decided that if you're this area, you're going to get 7%.
You've recognized it. You've made an accommodation, but you didn't go too crazy.
Exactly. Okay. You have to have a fair line in the sand.
And it's a perception of being fair.
Exactly. Yeah. And kind of goes back to what the numbers that we saw. If I'm living in Georgia and I decide to move to New York, I'm sorry, that was my decision. I understand there's certain things that has to go on it, but the organization doesn't need to increase your compensation by 200%.
Right.
So it's a fair line.
Yeah, and I love that concept. And I think it's paid good dividends, in our recommendations to clients. We've got this balancing act, right? A definition of a successful HR program is the employees find it motivational, or they understand it and it's meaningful, but it's also reasonable to administer.
Right.
So we start with salary ranges. Why don't you have a salary range for every specific job? Because you could. There's nothing wrong with that. Nobody says you can't. But on the flip side of that, pretty nightmare to administer.
It's a lot of stuff going on.
So why do we have salary ranges? Because we cluster jobs into similar components and say that'll be easier to administer. Not because we're trying to make life easier for HR. Yes, we are.
Yes, but simple, easy to administrate, effective, efficient.
Yeah. But it's also a lot easier for a frontline manager to explain, why we have 8 salary ranges or 10 salary ranges for staff as opposed to 37.
Yeah.
Because what happens in that case, everybody wants a special title, right?
Yeah. And this is balancing the internal equity. So you have values of positions that are fairly similar. If you've banded those together with a fair line in the sand, that makes sense because you can look across and say, I'm in the same grade as a teller. I'm doing the same kind of level of work as a teller. That makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so that's kind of our wrap up of where we are on the idea of flexibility. So as we get ready for 23 and budgeting, again, our suggestion is make sure we put that money in for coaching frontline folks. When it comes to transparency, trying to explain our strategy and making sure member comes first, our employee comes first, our managers come first.
Make safety first.
Feel like
make it last.
It sounds like an election year. I'm gonna put a chicken in everyone's pot, right? But the idea is that the more that we can explain our strategies, keep them relatively simple, and be real consistent how we apply it. But I think what comes out of today is that flexibility. Ask. I don't think anything I've seen in the last 2 years of research tells me stuff that we haven't done before because I know it's worked. But let's just don't forget some of those tried and true things of asking an employee, what's the best way we can accommodate your schedule to make us successful?
Again, let's talk about change through people rather than to people and understand exactly what they value the most.
Okay.
Communication. All right, guys, thank you so much. This is this section here. Stay tuned. We're going to go ahead and talk about other sections as well. You'll be able to find those on the website, and we'll be seeing you again soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening in. Take care, guys.